here to talk to you today about outdoor learning, its history, where it is currently and why it's important for our future. In order to really understand the context of outdoor learning, we have to take a bit of a journey into the past. We have to start at the beginning of civilization, when all of outdoor learning for thousands of years was everything in the educational paradigm. That's all we did. All learning was outdoors, and that served a really important purpose for us. As a species, it allowed us to start generating societies. It helped us to build communities. It helped us to learn to hunt, to forage, to gather, to make tools, and to survive in the environment that we found ourselves in. As we've started to move towards a more complex society, what's happened is we have started to specialise in our education. It's become more and more specific. It's fitted into specific kind of contexts and subject areas. And as we've kind of done that, what's happened is we've moved to an Enlightenment model from the 15th century, and education was shaped by the kind of Jesuit priests, and it was designed as an elitist function. It valued the esoteric above the practical, and it's allowed modern culture to develop. There's no denying its function in modern society. We live in a global world, and digital media is really important to the way that we exist today. The trouble with having brought education into the four walls of a classroom is that it has really honed in what we consider education towards what is acceptable in society, what looks inward in society, and what functions as far as the jobs we perform in the culture we find ourselves in. What we've lost as a result of that is that we've lost this view of who we are as people in the wider context of the outside world, nature, and the connections that we used to have by having that wider context. We no longer have a holistic view of ourselves in the world as a species. We are far too inward looking. So what have we lost? It would be easy to argue that the current education fits our current society. We no longer have a need for outdoor learning in the way that we used to. I'd like to share with you a few facts and a few statistics that hopefully will give you a broader context to this. So the first and the most scary, in my opinion, is that 75% of school-age learners receive less than the prescribed legal minimum of outdoor time for prisoners in the UK. Other stats include there are recent government surveys that show that 90% of learners have no access to outdoor learning. And there was a recent study done by the government that showed that over 20% of Year 6 students, this is primary age students, are considered obese. Other studies done by the BBC show that 20% of under-16s have had nightmares about climate change, and that 40% of children under 16 don't trust that adults in our society are able to solve the problem. Okay, so we've established that learning has moved more indoors, along with the culture and everything getting a little bit more complex, and there is a definite need for that. We've also established that that has lost a large part of the holistic nature of education that we used to have when outdoor learning was more prevalent. The question really now is, why outdoor learning? How would outdoor learning in particular help solve this problem and provide that holistic education that our learners in today's society really need? For me, that fits into a few broad categories. First, it's experiential. The experiential nature of learning is so critical to providing a broad aspect of education. What it does is it takes the idea of learning away from those that are good at recall and memory, those that can read and write effectively, and it allows learners that connect dots in different ways to express themselves and actually understand the subjects that they're being taught. A really good example of this is take learning a right angle in maths. For some learners, learning that on a piece of graph paper is a way of actually understanding that concept, and they can do that in that kind of environment in a classroom. For other learners, that simply will never work, and providing an opportunity for them to go out and experience a building project that involves the right angles of a roof frame, for instance, will really cement that context and that mathematical subject for those learners in a way that they simply would never get from sitting down in a classroom. It has to be part of that consideration. Another really broad example is the holistic nature of outdoor learning. Being out in the environment provides an opportunity to learn social emotional skills, to connect with your peers, to learn how to fall out, how to argue, how to negotiate. It provides a wider context for how to access those areas of a social education that we are not providing our learners with currently. A really good example of this is how we approach failure. If you have failure in an exam context, you have yes, no answers, things are right or wrong, and you end up with a percentage at the end. That leaves you with a pass or a fail. What that does for some learners is it raises anxiety and it shuts down the ability to learn. There's a great example of a social context of failure that can be learned through outdoor education. I used to run the Prince's Trust Team programme. I had a group of learners that came in who had not been able to access education at college, and what they did as part of that was they went on a week's residential. Part of that residential, they did an abseil. Now, for half the group, this was a really exciting prospect. For the other half, it absolutely terrified them. The biggest part of the learning for me out of that whole process was that all the learners collectively united in the challenge of everyone achieving that abseil. That social cohesion that outdoor activity provided was bigger for those learners than anything they could have got from the classroom. Thirdly, it's really empowering. As I said before, that aspect of failure and having that as part of the learning is really important, but it also allows learners to access the outdoors in a way they simply aren't able to in modern society. Previously, learners would have been able to play football in the street and build a community that way. They would have been out on their bikes more. They would have been allowed to explore the local environment. These things aren't happening today, and a recent survey showed that 47% of parents in the UK said they are scared to allow their children to access the outdoors in their communities and in their local context in the way that they did when they were children. So why now? Why is outdoor learning so critical at this juncture? For me, there are a few key points here. The first is, it's really important to understand that the job of us as educators is to empower change. Our job is not simply to impart knowledge and have that regurgitated. We need to prepare young people for the future and for a future that they are going to be living in. Currently, that future involves massive concerns and anxieties around climate change, a very shifting kind of approach to how we see green economics. There's lots and lots of really important work to be done to help educate young people for the future demands. That's both economic and holistic. It's really important for me that the young people involved in that are part of that debate. They have to be engaged with what's going on in their lives and what they're going to be experiencing in the future. It's really important that they take a lead on that and are empowered to do that. This is not without challenge. There are quite a lot of things that are stood in the way of us providing outdoor learning in the way that I think we should be. First, there's a big global disconnect currently between the educational model we're using and what we actually need in the future. We also have a deep mistrust in our young people of the journey that we are taking them on. When I referred earlier to the stats from the BBC, a further stat from that same study was that when people under the age of 16 were asked whether they had any trust in the leaders of our country to tackle climate change, 60% said no. I'd like this to be a bit of a call to arms. What I'm trying to do is empower some change, and the reason for that really is because our young people are facing something unknown. There is no planet B. We don't have a second chance. There's a really good proverb here from the First Nation people in America that I want to share. They say, we do not inherit the planet from our parents. What we do is we borrow it from our children. I think that is really important for us to look at this juncture. We need to be looking to the future in a new way. We need to be equipping our young people to face a future that is completely uncertain. And for me, outdoor learning and learning beyond the classroom is the most powerful tool we have to actually affect that change.